Kylie. Welcome to This is Horror.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So, to begin with, I want to know what were some of the early life lessons that you learned growing up in Boston?
Oh my gosh. Specifically growing up in Boston. I mean, I'd say the biggest one for any Bostonian is mind your own business. In the Northeast here, we're really big on not getting into other people's problems. We're not friendly here at all, at least compared to the South. You don't smile at anyone on the street. You just get where you need to go and do it efficiently. Also, that Dunkin' Donuts is the most important store in the world. I learned that at a very early age, coming from Boston.
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of contrast with a lot of countries just between the city and the country, and the more built up the city is, the more it's like, yeah, don't look at other people, don't try and communicate with them. What are you doing?
Exactly. Exactly. Don't talk to anyone here. People will think it's strange.
Yeah. And I mean, I wonder as well. So, I mean, when you were growing up, I want to talk specifically about your interest in horror and in
Sure.
reading and
Hmm.
writing. So, to begin with, I understand that you were watching a lot of horror movies from a very early age, and
Yes.
that is perhaps your father's influence.
Oh, it definitely is his influence. Yes, I fully blame him for that. We watched one just the other day, so we're still going with the tradition.
So, what were some of the early horror movies that you were watching?
The first one I remember is The Silence of the Lambs, and I didn't realize until I got to college and we studied it in my screenwriting class, and then I got deja vu and I was like, I remember seeing this when I was in elementary school. Why did I watch that so young? And then after that would be the US remake of The Grudge and then The Ring. I was definitely too young to be watching The Grudge because I remember just being in my grandmother's house, just terrified of getting up to go to the bathroom at night. That one really scared me. But it's all for the best because I feel like now nothing scares me. Sort of like when you're a kid and you get sick all the time, and then as an adult you don't get sick anymore because your immune system is just so well developed. I feel like I've been, vaccinated against fear essentially. So now nothing scares me except spiders.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, as an elementary school student, you were watching The Grudge, The
Yeah.
Ring, and Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, yeah. It explains a lot about me as a person. When I tell people that, they go, "Oh, that makes sense."
And I mean, was there a film or a moment where it confirmed that horror was one of the genres for you? Or were you more just passively taking these in and developing?
Maybe it was more passive. There wasn't any one particular moment, but I always just really enjoyed it. I think especially as I started getting into middle school and then high school, just because I was such a cynical child for no reason. But I really enjoyed watching horror movies because I knew I wouldn't have to think about romance and I wouldn't have to see a happy ending and be like, "Oh, that's not realistic. The world doesn't work that way," because I was so cynical for no reason at all. So I sort of liked having that sort of safe space where I'm not going to encounter anything that's that close to my real life in horror. Just fun and scares and blood and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. And when did you watch the original versions of The Grudge and Ring?
Not until I was an adult. I don't know exactly when, but it had been long enough that the special effects felt very outdated to me by the time I saw them. Maybe in the last few years, or so. So, I mean, I don't feel like I can judge them fairly because, of course, what scares me as a 10-year-old is very different from what scares me as like a 25-year-old.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's reasonable and that's
Yeah,
normal.
yeah. I should hope.
Yeah. And in terms of the reading component, what were some of the first stories that you were reading?
So I remember going to my local public library and I would just clear the shelves of all these mass market paperback horror books in the young adult section, just like 10 of them at a time. I read so many and so quickly that I honestly don't even remember the names of a lot of them. Like I could tell you what happens in a lot of them. There was one book about this girl who like finds out she has a secret twin who's trying to kill her. Like I remember the plots very vividly, but not the stories themselves. And then once I finished that section, I moved on to the adult horror section where I started clearing the shelves of all the Stephen King books. And I remember reading like The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon and Carrie. And I read as many as I could until I got through most of the books that he had written at the time that had female protagonists and also children, which I think might only be, or The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon is the most salient one in my mind now. But many of his books, as you probably know, are about 50-year-old widowers on an island in Maine, which, is totally fine. But as an Asian teenage girl, it wasn't the most relatable perspective for me personally. So I had reached the upper limits of my library at that point, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, did were you also writing stories from a young age? Did you know that you wanted to be a writer from a young age?
Yes, I always loved writing. I remember just sitting on my bed writing on these sheets of printer paper, not even lined paper, so it looked horrible. It would go like diagonally across the page. Just writing all these stories when I was a kid. And I was very fortunate because I had teachers that were very non-traditional, I suppose, in elementary school. Teachers who would do things like have us put on a play for like the last quarter of the year instead of studying for a final exam, and like they really encouraged us to be creative. So I got to write all the time when I was a kid. I never thought it would end up being my job one day, but I always knew it would be something that I would enjoy and hope to continue throughout my life.
So it's interesting that you said that you didn't realize it would be your job because there must have been some optimism or some hope because you then went on at university to take a BA in creative writing.
Yeah. So what happened with that was I started college thinking, okay, I'm going to be a UN translator in Spanish and Chinese. Um, and then I found out that you need to be really, really, really fluent in your second language in order to do that. And I speak Spanish pretty well, like that could be doable for me, but I was not anywhere near good enough at Chinese. And in America, just speaking Spanish and English is really not in and of itself that rare anymore. And for to work for the UN, you also need to speak French, which I didn't speak at all. So it's like, okay, how many years is it then going to take me to be qualified for this? So I, as I think many college students do, had a mental breakdown and was like, what am I doing with my life? I need to change my major immediately to something that can actually help build my future. And I decided that I would have one practical major and one fun major. And so my practical major was Spanish. And my fun major was creative writing, which now is pretty funny to me because I have not made a single cent from speaking Spanish. I only continue to lose money speaking Spanish because I pay to take Spanish lessons so I can keep speaking it. Whereas I've made a living off of my creative writing degree somehow. So that's definitely not what I expected.
I mean, that's probably not on any creative writing graduate's bingo card, is it really?
No.
I also did a BA in creative writing,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I have seen that, like, the vast majority, unfortunately, of people who did that undergrad course are not really doing creative writing at the moment, or
Yeah.
but it was a hell of a lot of fun. I will
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
exactly, and I feel like that's what most people do it for. That's what I was doing it for.
Yeah.
I just need to pursue something that makes me excited to be alive?
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, that is the objective in general, I think, regardless of what stage of life you're at.
Mhm.
And I wonder too, I mean, how did your Japanese, Chinese, and Irish heritage inform or impact your upbringing?
So I had an interesting upbringing as a biracial child. I grew up just outside of Boston, which is a pretty diverse city by most American standards, though in the particular suburb that I grew up in, there were not many Chinese people and there were no Japanese people. So there were some, we have a pretty sizable Vietnamese community where I'm from, but in my graduating class, there were maybe 10 or so Asian students out of like the 300 that were there. So we all knew each other very well. I was very much, quote unquote, one of the Asians in my school. I identified very strongly with being Asian American. And then when I went to college, Emory University has a comparatively huge Asian population. It's something like 30% of the student body is Asian, some of that being Asian American students and some of that being international students. They have a large population of Chinese and Korean international students. And then all of a sudden, I was not really that Asian anymore. Like I met a lot of people there who were from China or Korea, and the first time they met me, often in the capacity of an ESL tutor, because I helped tutor a lot of international students. A lot of them didn't realize I was Asian at all, and so it was maybe the first time I started to realize how much my identity changes depending on who's perceiving me. And then, of course, after college, I moved to Korea, where I was really, really not considered an Asian person there. So I've had all sorts of experiences in terms of how my race informs how I view the world. But just, I suppose, to get back to your question in terms of actually growing up in Boston, I think Boston is certainly not the most diverse place in the world, especially for Asian people compared to like on the West Coast. But we do still have a lot of culture here. Like we do have a Chinatown, we do have a Japanese school, and so I definitely had what I would consider a very fun and standard Asian American experience with my friends here. So I definitely felt connected to that particular identity growing up. And then also, Boston is a very Irish city. So that was also definitely a big part of my upbringing. Like, I remember going to this Irish pub with my dad when I was a kid and just like dancing around and just like drinking orange juice sitting at the bar. And I didn't learn until I was in high school that you're actually not supposed to let children sit at the bar. That's actually illegal here. And I was like, what do you mean? I did that all the time when I was a kid. But apparently that's just an Irish pub thing. That's not actually something you're supposed to do. So that's also, culturally a huge part of who I am. Though I would say overall, I'm definitely American. Unfortunately, I say these days. But my family on both sides has been in America for quite a few generations now. So as much as I identify with Irish American, Asian American, I think American is like the biggest word there. Like I can't live without air conditioning. Whenever I go to the UK, I feel like such an American princess. I'm like, oh, I can't. There's no AC here. How do people live? I can't do this. So, that is probably the most prominent part of my identity, for better or worse.
Well, I mean, we're not going to sidetrack for too long on ACs, but I will say, having now lived in Japan for a number of years, I am so used to the AC. So when I come back to the UK, it's
Right?
like, what is going on here? And I feel it's because, during, like, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, the weather was just not as hot in the UK.
Yes.
So there wasn't really a requirement and,
Yes.
for there to be an AC beyond kind of commercial offices. But now with a thing called global warming,
Yes.
it's
Also,
needed.
also small sidetrack here. I was in London on the hottest day of the year in 2024. I was cat sitting, and I reached this person's apartment. It was on the fifth floor of an apartment building. It's like a 90-degree day. No AC, of course, but also because of her cat, I couldn't open the windows because the cat would try to jump out from the fifth floor. So I remember just lying in bed and thinking, I'm not going to survive this. I'm too spoiled and American to live this way.
No, I understand that. And during my childhood, there would be one or two hot days of the year. So you'd only have one or two that
Yeah.
you had to suffer. But, talking about it now, I'm getting these vague flashbacks. And, basically everyone would just be walking around the house with like fans circulating everywhere. So just circulating hot, muggy air.
Yeah.
Um, Everyone's sweating, everyone's angry, no one can sleep properly.
Yep, yep.
It's not a good time.
No,
Just
no, I
get an
don't think fans
AC.
do anything.
Yeah, no. Fans just circulate air and circulate irritation. If anything, they're
Yes.
exacerbating
They make you
the
feel like you're
anger.
doing something to fight the heat, but you're not
Yeah,
really.
yeah. But away from
Yes.
ACs and back to, your Chinese heritage specifically, because you mentioned about your Spanish being very good, but your Chinese wasn't quite there. So I'm wondering, when did the Chinese language factor in to your life? How did it factor in?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I wasn't around anyone in my family who could fluently speak Chinese or Japanese, unfortunately, and I think that's just a byproduct of how many generations we've been in the United States. Though there is a pretty sizable Cantonese population where I'm from. The few Chinese friends I had were Cantonese, so I studied Cantonese a bit when I was in middle school and high school, though it's a pretty difficult dialect to pick up if you're not a native speaker. Like, I don't know how familiar you are with Chinese, but in Mandarin, there's different kinds of tones. Like, there's a rising tone and a falling tone, and it changes the meaning of the words. In Cantonese, it's like there's a rising tone, and then there's a tone that rises slightly more, and you need to differentiate them somehow. And I just don't understand how you do that if you don't grow up speaking it since you're a baby. So that was difficult. But then when I got to college, I started formally studying Mandarin. And I got reasonably good at it just by merit of how much time I spent studying it. And I also had many friends who were Chinese international students, and I made more friends who were Chinese American and spoke Mandarin at home rather than Cantonese. So it was very easy to practice with them. I remember going to like karaoke and singing Chinese songs. Like there's this one Chinese song called Fairy Tale that is like the typical karaoke song for Chinese speakers. I can remember every single word of that in Chinese, even though I've forgotten so much of my Chinese at that point. I could sing that like at the drop of a hat. So that was definitely my peak Chinese language era. I got conned into doing like a Chinese language speaking contest at one point at my college. It was a whole thing. I was okay at it. I understood a reasonable amount. And then I sort of lost it over the years as first I got off the schedule for the Chinese courses I was going to take because I studied abroad in Spain for a semester. And then I missed the next level of the class. And then I never really got back into it. And then I moved to Korea, and then Korean obliterated any Chinese left in my brain because there are a lot of similarities. And it was too confusing for me to try to hold on to Chinese at the same time. And I would love to get back to it one day, but it's also an issue of there's not a lot of opportunity to speak it in my daily life, unfortunately.
And seeing as you mentioned going and living in Korea,
Mhm.
why of all the countries did you decide Korea?
Well, I looked at a lot of different programs for teaching English abroad. And Korea, to be perfectly honest, pays the best out of out of the East Asian countries I was looking at. And I also thought in some ways it would be easier because it wouldn't be like an identity issue for me. Like I wouldn't be walking around Japan or China thinking, "Oh man, this could have been my life," or I should be able to speak more because this is my heritage. I would just, totally new place, totally new culture. And I was excited to go anywhere after college. I was a bit tired of academia. So I just wanted to explore, and that seemed like a good place to start.
And so how long were you living in Korea for, and what were some of your favorite aspects and perhaps some of your least favorite aspects?
I was there for 2 years. I think my favorite. part of being there was the food because it's so good and so cheap. Like people ask me for restaurant recommendations in Korea and I'm like, I don't know. I never like looked the way I do in America. I never would like look up restaurants and read the reviews first. I would just walk into any restaurant and find something good and very inexpensive. And also the public transportation there puts everything in America to shame. I could go anywhere I wanted. It didn't make sense to me why people had cars when they lived in that city. It was so convenient, so easy. Probably the worst thing was the air quality. And this is perhaps ignorant of me, but I had no idea that there were air quality problems in Korea. I of course have heard of the air quality issues in China, and then what I didn't know is a lot of that then blows over to Korea. So that was an unpleasant surprise. I got used to very hazy looking skies most of the time and like my skin breaking out terribly. Checking the air quality forecast every day to see if I need to wear a mask to work. So that was not my favorite part of living there.
Well, I mean, talking about wearing a mask, obviously
Yeah.
during and post COVID, that has become something that is very well known within the West. But I remember when I first came to Japan in 2014, like this was the first experience I'd had with wearing a mask or other people wearing masks. I mean, to begin with, I was a bit worried. I was like, is everyone okay? And
Yeah.
then I found out actually often the people wearing the mask are wearing it so that they don't become ill. They're not the
Yeah.
people who are sick.
Yeah, it's such a different perception. And people in Korea will just wear it to be fashionable sometimes too,
Right.
or if they're like, I didn't put on makeup today, I'm gonna put on a mask. And it's funny because I watch reality TV shows, Korean shows with some of my friends, and they were watching the show that was shot pre-pandemic and they were saying it's so confusing to me that all these K-pop idols are wearing masks and it's like 2018. I'm like, yeah, they've been wearing them. That was not a hard transition for them.
And then, since we're going to talk a little bit later about Japanese Gothic, have you visited Japan? Did you visit Japan while you were in Korea just because of how near they are?
I did, yeah. I spent a couple weeks in Japan, towards my second year in Korea. I didn't spend a lot of time there because I didn't have that much money back then. I mean, so when I say that in Korea they paid the best out of the Asian countries, it was like I wasn't becoming a millionaire in Korea. So, in hindsight, I definitely wish I'd traveled more. But yes, I did get to visit Japan when I was there. I went to Kyoto, which was beautiful.
Yeah, and I'm aware of the ESL industry and the pay, and
Yeah.
it's something that unfortunately, like the longer time has gone on, the worse it's got.
Oh
Like I think,
no.
I think the best time to have gone would have been the 1980s, and I am
Oh
not
my.
old enough
Oh
to have
no.
been able to do that. But I mean, in terms of your time in Japan, so have you since visited after?
I haven't. I'm going
Okay.
back in a few months actually for the first
Oh,
time. It's been a while, but I'm excited.
are you going back? Is it related to Japanese Gothic or is it just a
No, I wish. I really should try harder to plan trips that I can then write off as business expenses related to my books, but no, this is really just a family vacation.
I mean, it depends how good your accountant is. Can you not be like, look, this country's called Japan. It's not always got Japanese in the title. Can
You
we?
know, I bet I totally could expense it. I just could not get enough brain cells to rub together to start the fire that I would need to plan a trip at this moment in time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what was the moment or what was the book where you became a full-time writer?
I decided to go full time, I think, shortly after I sold Bat Eater. So I want to say that was, oh gosh, 2023 or around then. I might be off by a year or two. But yeah, when I sold my fifth book, more or less, because at that point had my master's degree, I was working part time at the Harvard Law School archives, which I really enjoyed. But at that point, I was just making more money writing than I was working in archives, even though that took up like half of my work week. So when my contract came up for renewal at the library, I thought, okay, I think now is a good time for me to take the jump and see what happens. And that's what I've been doing since then.
And to get a sense of the timeline, so at what point were you given the deal, and at what
Oh, that's a
point
good
did you
question.
not renew your contract?
That's a good question. Okay, so I sold Bat Eater, I want to say about 2 years before it came out, because we had to push it a little bit because I had a young adult book coming out in the season we wanted to publish it. So Bat Eater came out in 2025, 24. Okay, so yeah, I think I probably sold it around summer, fall of 2023, I think.
And so, I mean, what did that process look like? Were you using the same agent that had been selling things for your young adult series and your young adult books? And was it a difficult pitch to be, presenting something quite different, and not just something different, but something that was very prescient and also might have made some publishers nervous? Because I mean,
Yes.
this is possibly the most authentic COVID horror novel that exists.
Yes, oh, absolutely. So, yes, I was still with my same literary agent. Her name is Mary. She has very eclectic taste. She's always been down for whatever I want to write. So she was very excited about this one. Um, and yes, there definitely was some hesitation on the part of publishers. A lot of them were very afraid to publish a COVID book. They thought nobody wants to go back to the pandemic. This is never going to sell. And so we were a little bit hesitant in our submission strategy just to see if we got a lot of overwhelming feedback that was like no COVID books, and then we'd see what we could do about it. But there definitely was some interest from editors early on. It was more of an issue, I think, of getting the sales team on board. I was very fortunate to find my editor, Leah, who was excited about the project, and so was the whole team at Mira. Now I'm at Hanover Square at the same publisher. Um, but I heard from other authors who are much more famous and successful than I will ever be, who told me they had tried to write COVID into their books around the same time, and their publisher said no. And I think part of that is because in their stories, you could take out COVID and still have a story. It wasn't a book about COVID. Whereas you really can't take COVID out of Bat Eater, or you don't have a story anymore. So I think when the publishers had an option to be like, let's just play it on the safe side, I think that's what they decided to do. So there's definitely been a lot of hesitation. And also on the reader side too, I've seen, as Bat Eater was chosen for different like special editions and book boxes and things like that, I would see the comments people were writing under the announcements, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, I don't want to read a book about COVID. That's too traumatic." Thankfully, now a lot of the comments I get or the reviews that I'm tagged in say, "I didn't want to read a book about COVID, but I'm actually really glad that I read this one." I don't know if they expect it to just be like gratuitous misery through the whole. I mean, I guess you could say that about Predator in some ways. But I think people appreciate that it's a perspective that they might not have considered. It's not one they had personal experience with during the pandemic, so it's easier to distance themselves from it a bit. So, I mean, in short, it was a very risky book to publish, but I think it paid off.
Yeah, and I think for people listening, if they haven't read Bat Eater, even though I'm saying this is an authentic COVID horror novel, this isn't just a book about COVID.
No.
A lot of this is deeply rooted in grief, and this is
Mhm.
certainly a grief horror novel. It's also about, friendships and family, and it's about redemption. It's about what happens when you lose everything,
Mhm.
including your entire faith in the world and in
Mhm.
other people. And I mean, I suppose to begin with, could you give the listeners the elevator pitch for Bat Eater?
Yeah, okay. Oh gosh, I'm moving into Japanese Gothic promos, so let's see if I still have the pitch up my sleeve from a year ago. So, Bat Eater is about a crime scene cleaner named Cora Zeng, whose sister is killed in an anti-Asian hate crime. That's not a spoiler, it happens in the first 10 pages. And then as she starts as she continues cleaning crime scenes, she starts to suspect that her sister's killer is still out there and is coming for her, and also that her sister's ghost is also following her during the Chinese folkloric month of hungry ghosts. So that was a bit all over the place, but I think I got the main points.
Yeah, and I think, in terms of ghosts, what I feel you've done with both Bat Eater and possibly even more with Japanese Gothic is taken this idea of the traditional ghost and then just inverted it and added a kind of new layer to it. So, I mean, I'm wondering, well, first of all, what are your own beliefs pertaining to the supernatural or lack thereof?
Interesting question. So I respect that other people may believe in ghosts, and but I don't believe that I will ever see a ghost, because I think I'm just too much of a hater. I feel like ghosts just see me roll into a haunted house and they're just like, what a bitch. I don't want to entertain her at all. For example, I stayed over at a haunted house for my 30th birthday. And when I say haunted house, I don't mean like an amusement park where there's actors. I mean a house that is actually haunted and they rent it out as a bed and breakfast. It's the site of an axe murder, like the oldest photographed it's from the oldest photographed murder in American history. It's like from the time of Jack the Ripper. This is where I chose to have my birthday, and it did not scare me at all. It terrified my poor friends who were good sports and went along with me. But I just knew, the ghosts are not gonna mess with me if they're there because they know it would satisfy me too much. But I also think, even though I'm a skeptic, I think it would be very hard to say that, because I have never seen something, that means it isn't real. Like, I don't like what that logic implies. So I respect other people. I'm jealous of other people who can see ghosts. I wish I could see ghosts. Sadly, not yet.
Is that part of why you had your 30th birthday in a haunted hotel because you wanted to see a ghost? Is there a genuine desire?
I mean, I didn't think I would see a ghost. I just thought it would be a fun, spooky time. Like, I wanted to turn off the lights and play hide and seek with my friends and like tell ghost stories and stuff like that. It's like the same feeling as watching horror movies, or being on a roller coaster or something like that. And it was the one time I felt like I could make my friends do it with me.
Did any of your friends have an experience while there?
No, though they said they were scared, but none of them said they actually saw a ghost. There was an instance where a picture frame kept repeatedly falling flat on the counter even when no one was near it, but we kind of suspect that the people who set up the bed and breakfast did that intentionally, like unbalanced it just so people will be like, "Oh, there's a ghost." But no, I didn't. There wasn't anything too remarkable to report, sadly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If you are operating a so-called haunted hotel, then there's certain expectations. So just making the fittings a little bit looser.
Yeah,
Let's make this
exactly.
really creaky as
They
well.
have it all decorated like the 1800s, and it was actually the second time I'd been there. So I was going around. We just arrived, and I'm giving my friends like the mini tour because we don't have the official tour yet. And one change that they had implemented since the previous time, which I did not know about, was they put mannequins in the positions where the people were murdered, just like fully dressed and covered in blood. I didn't know this when I walked in. So imagine I'm just going around the side of the bed and I'm like, so this is where the mother died. And then there's just a bloody corpse on the floor that was definitely not there the last time. So that was the one jump scare I had when I was there. But then I then slept in that room on the side where the corpse was. So clearly didn't phase me too much.
So that means if you get up in the middle of the night, you have to kind of maneuver
Oh,
over.
yeah, I gently slid the mannequin away because I didn't wanna step on her.
Ah. And so back to grief horror,
Yes.
what are your own experiences with grief and what informed the writing of the grief element of Bat Eater?
You know, I have been fortunate enough to not have had really any significant personal experience with grief as of yet in my life. I know I will. Everyone will. I mean, I think maybe I write about death a lot because it comes from anticipatory grief. Like I'm an only child, and I've always been very close to my parents, who are a bit older. I think they had me at an older age, so I've always been aware, like compared to my friends, my parents are a bit older. So it's even when I was a kid, I thought a lot about, what am I going to do when my parents die? So I think maybe that's part of why I write about it. And there was a second part to your question and I'm blanking on it. I'm sorry. Could you remind me?
So, I mean, I was asking about what informed the writing of the novel specifically to do with the grief horror.
Hmm. Um, I think for me, or for Cora rather, it is an extension of, I think, the sense of loss that you mentioned earlier in the pandemic, just losing faith in society, losing faith in your government, and losing faith in other people. And I just really like to write about family relationships, like sister relationships. And so that seems like a very devastating extension of what I think a lot of us experienced. So maybe that's why I gravitated towards that particular darkness in this book.
And so you've said before in numerous interviews that the heart of horror is justice and catharsis.
Yeah. Oh
So
no, you've seen many of my interviews where I repeat myself all the time.
no, no,
Yes.
they're very good interviews, and
Thank you.
but this seems to be almost your mission statement as it
Yeah.
pertains to horror fiction. So I wonder, when did this truth first become apparent to you? And, talking about and hearing you talk about COVID, was some of the writing of Bat Eater almost a way to combat and to, I don't know, get your own justice for the atrocities that happened?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for obvious reasons, anti-Asian hate crimes and anti-Asian sentiment was very top of mind for me during the pandemic. I think I wrote this book around like 2021, so still relatively early into that time. And there's nothing scarier than the real world. And we were living and are still living in such unprecedented times. And I just think horror is a perfect vehicle for confronting, your worst fears, everything you're afraid of, everything that breaks your heart. And in terms of, I think when I first came to understand this, it was definitely after I started writing horror and reading horror as an adult and got a much better sense of what I believe is to be good horror, or the kind of horror that moves me. Because obviously, as a child, I consumed a lot of horror, but I didn't have particularly well developed thoughts about it. It was just, oh, this was fun. I liked this. Whereas now as an adult, it's much clearer to me when I read a book or I watch a horror film. It's very obvious to me when it's written by someone who does not understand or respect horror. And that just ruins it for me. But it's so easy to tell because they think, you know, there's just all this violence and that's what people want. And it's like, well, maybe in some like extreme horror, like sure, I'm not going to yuck anybody's yum, but most of the time, The violence is there to show you something. It doesn't exist in and of itself. It's every good horror story still has a point to it. And it's almost so insulting to me when people don't get that and then their movies still like end up on Netflix and I'm like, how did you get all this money? I could have done this better. And because I love horror, you don't love horror, and it makes me so frustrated because there's the potential for it to be so powerful and people just throw it all away because they don't respect horror as a genre. And that I could rant all day about that, but obviously that's that was not a thought I had as a child.
No, I mean, I completely agree with you there. And I mean, sometimes we see amateur filmmakers or people starting out in filmmaking deciding, oh, I'm going to make a horror film to begin with because it's easy. And as you say, it's like, well, that proves that you don't understand horror. And also, you're part of the problem as to why, in some circles, quite a few circles, unfortunately, horror has a bad name and a bad
Exactly.
reputation.
Yes.
But I mean, when you look at the best horror cinema, and the best horror literature, you can remove horror because it is the best cinema, it is the best literature.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, as someone who is now writing horror, what do you think are the do's and don'ts of writing a good horror story?
I mean, I think a lot of it is the same thing that you would say for any genre, which is why it's wild to me that some people think it just doesn't apply because they just don't respect horror. But you would be amazed how many books and movies in the horror genre don't do this, which is that there needs to be a character arc and there needs to be a point. Like you need to be able to say, why am I telling this story? What am I trying to say? What do I want people to take away from this other than ew, there was a lot of blood? Like, and so many horror movies don't accomplish those very simple two things. So that's definitely important. But I guess in terms of if we go one step up from that and assume that we're at a baseline level of what I consider to be good horror, then I guess the moment of I feel like I shouldn't say catharsis now. I need to like take a shot every time I say catharsis since I've said it in so many
Yeah,
interviews now.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I've now made
No,
you
it's okay.
self-conscious.
No, no. I mean, it's true. I just love saying it. It's my mission.
It's a
But
good word as well.
for me, I think the most powerful moment in any horror book or movie is the moment when you finally confront the monster head on, the monster that either literally is or represents the internal problem the character is trying to face, and they finally get to confront it. And that to me is the most important moment in horror. And they don't even necessarily have to win, but they need to, face it finally if they've been trying not to face it the whole time. So I think if you have those components, those are like the bones of what I find to be the most satisfying kind of horror story. And if you have that, I feel like there's so many different things you can do. Like someone asked me recently about my favorite horror subgenres, and I was like, all of them, every horror element. I am not picky. All I care about is that there is some sort of emotional arc in there. And then if you have that, I'm down for the ride. I'm down for all the blood and guts and viscera, as long as there is something that makes me care about it. Because I don't care about blood and guts if it belongs to a stranger. Like, if I have an emotional connection, then you can sell me anything.
Right. And if we talk about, the different elements and the things that you care about, what was the first element of Japanese Gothic that you had? And can you talk us through the evolution from that initial idea to the first draft?
Yes. So I Japanese Gothic began because I really wanted to write a Japanese haunted house book, and I had for a very long time. Actually, ever since I saw the US remake of The Grudge as a kid, that idea had been sort of brewing in the back of my mind. Because as I got older and thought more about the movie and rewatched it, I started to think, oh, there are certain things I would probably do a little bit differently with this movie. Not to say that, I'm a better filmmaker, but just things like in the US remake, it's this innocent blonde American woman who is just inexplicably in Japan and then gets tormented by these mean Japanese ghosts who, have no mercy and aren't Japanese people scary in the dark with their long black hair. Some parts of it as an adult I was like, I don't know if I like the way this was presented. I think this could have been presented with a little bit more nuance that does not exoticize Japanese people and culture quite as much. Even though it is a good movie, as an adult, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. So I really wanted to do my take on a Japanese haunted house story, and then from there, I started thinking about, well, how can I make this different? Because of course there's so many haunted house stories out there, and I always try to think, how can I turn horror tropes on their heads? So I became really obsessed with this idea of a mutual haunting. Like, you start out like a very standard formulaic haunted house book, but then in the second timeline, you see that she's actually being haunted too by the person in the other timeline. And then which one of them is the ghost? And so I was trying to figure out how to make that idea work for a long time. And then I read The Book of Accidents by Chuck Wendig, which is an incredible book. And it's not a dual timeline book the way that this is, but it is about alternate universes, alternate versions of the same life, the same boy in different circumstances. And there's this recurring theme of doors that you go through that one character is making in the book that lead you to these different worlds. And that's how the book finishes, with just one more door. And I thought that was such a powerful ending. It just really stuck with me. And I was like, man, I love doors. Doors are so creepy. It's such a loaded image. And how could I write a book of doors? And then I thought about, in a Japanese haunted house, they have those sliding doors where you can see a shadow behind it. Isn't that scary? And so those are all the different pieces I think I started with that then had to sort of pull together into Japanese Gothic.
And this is exactly what I was touching on in terms of this inverting the haunted and the
Mhm.
haunting trope, because you've got Lee, who killed his college roommate in 2026. Again,
Mhm.
not a spoiler.
No, it's not a
That
spoiler.
that is very much up front.
Mhm.
And then you've got Sen, a samurai in 1877, and these are not flashbacks. These are literally occurring at the same time. And the moment as a reader that you realize this, it's like, wow, mind blown. And I wonder, what things did you put in place to ensure that you did this so successfully?
Like, you mean balancing both timelines?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And to kind of distinguish between them not being flashbacks, but actually simultaneously occurring and affecting each period.
Well, I think the main thing is that, at least in the beginning, I tried to set a very solid foundation of juxtaposing like different versions of the same scene at once. So it's like, here's Lee, meet Lee's family, see what Lee is doing. Here's Sen, meet Sen's family. And then even when they have flashbacks, it's like, here's a flashback to when Lee was a child with his mom. Here's a flashback to when Sen was a child with her dad. So I don't follow this completely throughout the book, but I tried to be as parallel as possible because I think it's a really interesting comparison between the two. A lot of it, I know this is an incredibly unhelpful answer, but people ask me this a lot. Like, how did you do this? I'm like, it's just kind of intuitive for me how I juggled the two timelines, and I did it really badly the first time around. I had to revise so much of this book when I read it, and I went, Lee is so interesting. I somehow didn't give Sen a character arc at all. Let me spend 2 months revising this because I should have outlined this much better the first time around. So let me go and fix it. Let me get feedback from my friends and then go and fix it. So I did it in a very unorganized manner that was very inefficient and was sort of pulled together at the last minute.
So then it sounds like, for at least this book, I don't know about for all of your books, but you had an outline that you were following. So at This Is Horror, we're very interested in writing process and the minutiae. So I wonder, firstly, what does your daily writing routine look like? And then, secondly, what did the routine from outline to finished book look like? How many drafts did it go through?
So my writing process changes so much from book to book. I mean, I can say right now the way I write is generally I wake up and it's one of the first things I do because I feel like I have the most mental energy. My battery has not been totally drained yet. I try to just go right into it and not stop until I hit a wall, maybe like 90 minutes later or so. I can write very quickly when I do it this way. Not all the words are good, but I can write, like, I think right now I've been doing like 3,000 words in like an hour and a half or so when I'm really in the zone. And I try to also do a little bit of reverse outlining in this new app that Fonda Lee recommended called Aeon Timeline, which is so handy for organizing my timeline. So I try to keep that updated as I go along because I know that will help me with the revision process. But normally, what I try to do is I outline up to a chapter level and then I write the first like two or three chapters and try to really polish them because if I have no confidence that the book is any good, it makes it really hard for me to keep writing. So I try to have like a good beginning and then fast draft the rest of it. That's my like 3,000 words in 90 minutes. This draft can never see the light of day until I revise it. I just need to get to the end of it and then I can go back and fix it. I try to do that, but I guess what I'm finding is that that only works for certain books. I don't think that's what I should have done for Japanese Gothic because it was my first dual timeline, dual POV book, and I learned very quickly that I should have planned it a lot more before I started fast drafting because I wasted a lot of time and a lot of words. I guess to answer your second question, that's how I began this book. Is I wrote it all as fast as humanly possible, and then went, okay, now I'll go back and polish it. And then as I was polishing it, I went, this doesn't make any sense. I need to go not just do a line edit pass. I need to completely rewrite a lot of these chapters because I have no idea how these are supposed to fit into the story. So I did, I don't even know, quite a few revision passes with this one. One of them involved sending it to beta readers, which I don't do for all of my books if they've already sold, which this one had. But I was just not confident at all in whether or not what I was doing was working because up until then, I'd only ever written books in one POV, much less dual timeline, dual POV. So I was like, oh gosh, is this working at all? And so I waited like a month for feedback from some of my author friends, then did a few more revision passes, and then I sent it to my editor because I try not to throw burning piles of garbage at my editors whenever possible. I feel like it's just more efficient for them to edit something that doesn't make me want to cry and hide my face in shame. So that was the long and tortuous process of writing Japanese Gothic. Though I think, it varies a lot depending on what books I'm doing. Like for a lot of my young adult books, I find that the plots are much more linear than my adult horror novels because I'm just getting more and more experimental with those. Like Hell to Pay, which is my next horror novel, which comes out in 2027, has three POV characters and is very weird. So for that kind of book, I knew from my mistakes in writing Japanese Gothic that I really needed to plot it a lot more if I didn't want to waste my time drafting it. Whereas right now I'm writing another young adult book that is very linear. And so I feel a bit more comfortable going in and fast drafting. And even then, sometimes I notice like, oh, I need to develop this plot line a bit more and I'll make a note of it. But I don't feel like I'm pouring my time directly into a dumpster. The way I would if I were if I were trying to fast draft a more complicated book. So I'm trying not to take a one size fits all approach to my books. It just really depends on the needs of that particular story.
And so then at the moment, in terms of your publishing schedule, are you roughly publishing one horror novel a year and one YA book a year?
That's the goal. Yeah, it's gotten a little bit off because we ended up shifting both of my books to the spring. So I think next year what year is it? Oh gosh, this is
It's
2026. This,
2026 right
this
now.
year, this year is only Japanese Gothic. But next year I will have a young adult book and an adult book coming out, both in the spring. And the plan is to continue doing that for the foreseeable future, unless one of my publishers just for some reason feels like giving me $1 million for my next book, in which case, I would be content to write one book a year. I do feel a little bit like my hair is on fire trying to do two books at once. I'm on like 4 deadlines right now across my different books. So that's been a challenge, but we do what we got to do, and I'm very lucky to have this job. As I remind myself every time I'm tired.
Okay, so the publishers have heard it here. $1 million is the price for the
Oh, that would be
exclusive
great.
one
That'd be
book
great.
per year. So, send all of your offers in, starting at 1 million. That
Yes,
is the
please.
minimum. So
Please.
you probably want to shift it up a bit to compete with the other
Oh,
publishers.
yes.
But if you're writing 2 books a year on average, I'm wondering, do you work on one project at a time? So are you kind of spending a number of months doing, say, a draft of your adult book, and then you're shifting to doing a draft of the YA? What does this logistically look like?
So it depends on what stage of writing I'm at. I personally find it very difficult to draft 2 books at the same time, but I can be at the very early stages of drafting one book and then do more detailed line edits on another book, because I feel like those use different parts of my brain. So I'm not just completely depleting my brain battery in the morning when I do my drafting. So that is pretty doable to me most of the time. I think it'd be really tricky to do the same thing all day, cuz writing, and I don't mean to be like, oh, I have the hardest job in the world, because I've worked quote unquote normal jobs before. Like I've done the 9 to 5. I've been a real person in the world. And to me, I think writing is a different kind of work in some ways, in the sense that I need to have my brain 100% on and locked in order to produce good writing. Whereas when I worked as an archivist, I definitely did not need to have my brain on at 100% for the entire 8 hours I was there during the day, as I feel like is the case for most jobs, which isn't to say that you can't, do hard work, but most people are not completely locked in from 9 to 5. You have like meetings, you have downtime, you have some work that you don't need to be totally, completely focused on. Writing is very tiring for my brain. And I don't think I could spend 8 hours a day writing well the way that I could work 8 hours in archives, the way that I did work 8 hours a day in archives. I could sit down and put my butt in the chair and try to write for 8 hours, but I think I would get diminishing returns after a while. So I think it's better to not be too overbooked whenever possible.
Yeah, I find that, and I found that a lot of other writers seem to have diminishing returns as well when it comes to writing. And I think, that's why a lot of writers, they kind of set up the day that they will begin with the creative work and with
Mhm.
writing fiction. And then after, it's all that kind of writing adjacent work that they will do.
Exactly, exactly. I don't need as much of my brain to answer emails as
Yeah.
I do for writing, which I think I've really been pushing the limits. I feel like people are getting more and more terse emails from me these days. Just fewer words, less emotion, not as many smiley faces to make sure they know I'm happy about it. If they get a response from me, I'm like, you should be happy with this. And then if I get a reply back, I'm like, no, don't email me. I just
Right.
cleared my inbox. Leave me alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, when I get a reply, I'll look as well. Is there a specific question?
Yeah.
If not, we can press that archive button.
Yes.
I wonder, in terms of the research for Japanese Gothic, what did you draw on? How did you go about it? Because I imagine there were an enormous amount of components. Because not only is this set in Kagoshima, you've got the Kagoshima of today, you've got the 1877 Kagoshima, you've got samurai Japan, although, as you also mentioned in the afterword, there's kind of some liberties taken there.
Yes.
And then you've also got folklore that you're drawing upon and these traditional Japanese tales.
Yeah, so in terms of Kagoshima and also any setting where I haven't been, Google Maps Street View is so handy for me just to get a sense of, the setting around my characters. But in terms of samurai history, which I think is where the largest part of my research had to happen, my first question, of course, was what is Sen, my samurai character, doing every day? Like, she wakes up and then what does she do? What does the life of a samurai look like? Because I know what the life of a college kid at his dad's house in Japan could reasonably look like, but I really had no idea for Sen. And so I read a book called Hagakure, which is seen in some circles as a guide to being a samurai, which was written by a man who actually was a samurai but lived in a time of peace, so he was more of a bureaucrat. But it has all these thoughts on, things that samurai should or shouldn't do, how they should behave, what they believe in, because that was really what mattered to me is what are if Sen is raised as a samurai, what are her governing beliefs going to be? How is she going to see her own position in the world? Because these are important questions for me as an author to know before I write any scene with her in it. And so I read that book and I took a lot of notes. And then I sort of, as I tried to do, zoomed out and like read about that book to see sort of how it fits into the history. And at that point is when I got a better sense of how it's really more of a book about struggling with the identity of being a samurai of being part of a warrior class in a time when there isn't war, because even when it was written there was no war in Japan, and it was written maybe 100 or so years before Sen's family picks it up. So really the samurai have not been out there like doing the blue eye samurai sword fighting thing for quite a while by the time Japanese Gothic starts. But then I thought that was such an interesting way to approach it, because really I'm more interested in speaking about the dynamics of one family than I am about speaking to what the samurai at large were like. And I think it felt much more personal that way, that this is sort of a world that Sen's father desires and has created because he believes in the glory of the samurai, as opposed to, this is what all samurai believed. And that was also something I learned is I couldn't find and never would find one source about what the samurai were like, because they were prevalent for centuries across all parts of Japan, and so they didn't follow one unified code. And of course, they had many things in common in terms of their beliefs, but there's not one definitive record that I could turn to. And that is why, as you said, I did take some liberties. I did my best to make it more or less, you know, threaded through with the commonalities between many samurai. But it is a bit asynchronous in the sense that people were not, as far as we know, behaving the way Sen's family did in 1877. They were probably not going out and killing people with their katanas. In fact, that would have been very illegal at the time.
Yeah, and I love there's a scene as well where Sen is in the modern day world and she wants to take her katana
Yes.
with her
Of
on the
course she
street.
does.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of leads into the stepmother, Hina, I believe. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, when did you know that Hina was going to be such a crucial element of this story?
Oh, definitely not until I started doing revisions with my editor. Um, without giving too much away, I think my original idea for Hina was just that I wanted someone who Lee could, one, talk about Japanese culture with, because his father really doesn't know as much as he thinks he does. And two, to have someone who cares about him and who he cares about in the real life, some sort of mother figure when his mother isn't there. And for a while, that was really all that she was. And then as I was doing revisions with my editor, she saw more opportunities to connect things across the timelines, in which case I also gave Sen a similar character in her world, which had not originally been there.
Yeah, and the connective tissue is so seamless, but we probably can't talk any longer about it for fear of giving things away.
Yeah. I did also want to mention, I just remembered because you had asked about my research in Japanese folklore. And so I wanted to say a huge part of it is a storybook that my mother read to me when I was a kid. And there are these legends interspersed in the story about the legend of Urashima Taro, which is not something that I created. That is an actual Japanese legend, which I, of course, reworded and reframed. So I'm not like plagiarizing anything. I'm sort of focusing on the parts of it that are relevant to this particular story. But I remember the illustration in that book that my mom showed me when I was a child. And I can't say what it is because that would be a spoiler, but it was a horrifying picture of what happens at the end of that legend. And so I knew at some point I definitely needed to work that into a horror novel. So now I have made it everyone else's problem.
Yeah, I recall while reading it, like being familiar with the actual legend, and I know, oh, okay, this is intriguing, and I think too, though, for people who aren't familiar, they're probably going to now want to go out and read the original.
Yeah, probably, if spoilers matter, probably wait until after you've read the book, because I feel like knowing how that legend ends might tell you some things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, of course, Japanese Gothic is also concerned with patriarchal structures and abusive fathers.
Mhm.
The two kind of go hand in hand. And so
Yeah.
I wonder what compelled you to explore this aspect of humanity?
I'm just so interested in exploring family dynamics. Like, family is so important to me, and I think it's such a universal thing. Everyone wants to be loved by their parents. And so that's a very easy way to, I think, have readers feel invested in characters. This is such a relatable desire. And I think these days in particular, I'm also very interested in people who are stuck in the past and the ways that it can be difficult to connect with them or change their minds just because they aren't willing to see that the world is different than it was when they were younger, and in fact has always been different than they perceive it. I personally have a great relationship with my parents, but I know a lot of people who have very complicated ones, because talking to people in different generations can sometimes be like speaking a different language, even if you are speaking the same language. And I think that's very sad, but also from a writing perspective, very interesting, because you have such intense, like primal emotions, wanting to feel parental love. And then it has just such potential to hurt. And so in the real world, that's awful, but in fiction, I think that's a very, very good place to be.
And so I wonder, because we've spoken a little bit about your relationship with your father, we've spoken about watching the horror movies, we've spoken about going to the Irish pub and singing karaoke. I'm wondering what is the relationship with your mother like, and how does that feed into your creative life?
So my mom is wonderful. She's the Asian parent, and she has always been very supportive of my creative endeavors, which is very not Asian parent of her. But she herself has a degree in flute performance from a conservatory. So she really can't be throwing stones in a glass house telling me that I need to be a doctor or a lawyer or something when her degree is in flute performance. But yeah, we've always we she does not watch horror movies with me and my dad. That's not really her thing. But we've always bonded over music because I played the cello growing up and she plays the flute. As I said, so that's sort of been more of what we lean into. I don't know if music has so much influenced my writing, but I think the biggest influence she's had on my writing life is just encouraging me. Like she sent me to all these summer camps that focused on creative writing when I was a kid in elementary school. It never mattered to her what I wanted to do, but she would, whatever it was, she would help me try to succeed at it. So she's been very great in that sense.
And to the best of your knowledge, do your parents read your books?
Oh yeah, they tell me about it. I hate when they do it. But my dad will be like, "Oh, I'm at the part in Bat Eater when this happens." I'm like, "I don't need a play by play." Like I also tell them you don't have to read it. Like I don't care. But they do. Also my grandmother, my mom will like drive up to visit her, give her one of my books, and then by the time my mom drives home, it's like a 3 hour drive. My grandmother will email me saying that she's finished the book and has very nice thoughts on it. So my family does all read my books, which definitely influences what I write in some ways. I had to think, okay, my mom will read this, so I got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, does that limit you in some sense, or do you just find it,
Uh, I mean, not in the ways you might expect. Like my parents know I'm weird. They know I'm like morbid. You know, I'm watching horror movies with my dad. That's not a secret. So it's not like I think they're going to be disturbed by anything that I write. I have not up until my most recent book, which is Hell to Pay, written a sex scene because I did not want my parents to read that. But I will just say that that has changed in my next book. But I honestly think when I give them their copies, I'm just gonna like put a post-it over that page and be like, you don't need to read this. Here's a summary of what happens. Please don't read it. I don't want to think about you reading it.
I don't know what your parents are like, but if somebody says that they don't want me to do something, that I'm reading that page first. That's
Oh no.
immediately
Oh
where I'm
no.
going. But I was gonna joke that you need to kind of release a parent's cut version. I mean, maybe
Yes.
literally cut. Just take some scissors and get
Rip the
rid.
pages
Yeah,
out.
get rid of that page
Be
or
like,
two
you don't need to
pages.
know. It's not important. You just forget about it. Don't worry.
Yeah, I
But
think
it's a lot
when
better than if I were like a rom-com author, like a romantasy author or something, when there would be too much to cut out. My
right.
parents would not be able to read my books at all. So it's been pretty safe up until now.
Well, at least it's only a one-page sex
Yeah.
scene. I believe that when we were talking to CJ Leeds, she said the next one has like a 25 page.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would I don't think my parents would be allowed to read my books at all if it had that much.
I mean, it sounds like a play-by-play. I
Yeah.
guess we're
It's a
gonna
lot of
find out.
detail.
Yeah, yeah. But goodness, I wonder, what did you learn about yourself and about writing through writing Japanese Gothic?
Well, one interesting thing I learned, I don't know if this is exactly what you meant by what I learned about myself, but I actually didn't know until I started researching this book that the samurai clan that Sen belongs to, which I chose purely based on geography of where the Satsuma Rebellion would have taken place, is the samurai clan that would have helped colonize the island of Okinawa, which is where my grandmother's family is from. I'm a quarter Okinawan Japanese, and Okinawa was annexed by Japan. So that samurai clan probably would have colonized my ancestors, which was weird to think about in hindsight. I mean, obviously, we're quite a few generations out of that, so I didn't have super strong personal feelings where it was like, no, we must change this to a different samurai clan. But that was interesting. And I suppose it was also interesting to think about what writing a samurai book meant for me as an Okinawan Japanese American person. Just because I think, when a lot of people think about Japan, what they think about is samurai. And I know that. And I know that in some ways I do feed into the perhaps stereotypical overconsumed image of, samurai are such cool warriors. Doesn't that girl look cool with a katana? She's so strong and badass. Like I'm aware. I think it's kind of inevitable when you write about samurai in that sense. Whereas in reality, at least for my family, it really wasn't that cool. It was quite the opposite, in fact. And maybe that's why I sort of as someone else said that my portrayal of samurai in this book reads quite critical. They didn't mean it as a criticism, and I think that's they're correct in saying that. It is kind of a critical way of portraying the samurai. If you take Seton's family as the samurai overall, which isn't my intention, and I think I do make that clear, though I do understand what that person meant. So I suppose um, writing this book definitely made me think about my own identity and my own family history.
Right, and as I mentioned previously, you do have a very serious note at the end about your Okinawan heritage and your complicated feelings
Yeah.
towards it, to put it mildly. And
Yeah.
I mean, I wondered, is that something that you might explore in a future novel?
Yeah, I would be open to that. I've written short stories that take place in Okinawa, though to be honest, I think I would need to do a lot more research, and ideally I would really love to visit Okinawa because I've never been there. So in some ways it would feel very inauthentic to me to try to write from that perspective when I don't have a lot of personal experience in it because my grandmother, who is my only living Japanese relative, she grew up in Hawaii, raised by Japanese American parents, and her experience is much more Japanese than it is Okinawan, even though she's 100% Okinawan. And that's because Japan outlawed a lot of traditional Okinawan practices. That's why the language is dying. That's why a lot of things like they had special hand tattoos for women, which were outlawed when Japan annexed Okinawa. So my grandmother then grew up thinking, oh, you can't have tattoos. That's what the Yakuza has, like that, which is a very Japanese, not Okinawan way of thinking. So in a lot of ways, I am sort of cut off from that culture, which is not in honestly that different from how I once felt about being Chinese American or Japanese American. And it's culture I went out and explored for myself, though I would say it's a bit easier, a bit more accessible to access Chinese American and Japanese American culture than it is Okinawan culture. It's a bit it's a bit harder to get that where I live. But yes, I would love to explore that more someday. I'm always a little bit scared when I think about it because Okinawa is a tropical place. And I grew up in Boston. I am Elsa, the snow princess who needs AC. I hate bugs. I hate humidity. I cannot believe that my ancestors are from Okinawa, whereas I go outside in 60-degree weather and go, it's too dang hot outside. I can't live like this.
I think on that basis, then the best time for you to visit Okinawa is to kind of go in December, January, when the rest of Japan is what I would think of as freezing, and you'd probably think of as ideal. And
Yes.
then, like Okinawa is kind of mild and quite pleasant, and more what I think of as British spring, which is
Sounds perfect.
yeah. So I
Exactly what I
actually
want.
yeah, I visited Okinawa in either it was yeah, late December or early January. So, and it was not tourist season, which meant that I could just, go about things without other humans mostly, which is also fine for me.
Yeah, okay, good. That's a good tip. That's when I should go for sure.
Yeah. But you said that you're going to be visiting Japan later this year. So
Yes.
where are you planning to go?
To be honest, my mom has planned most of this trip, and I have been so focused on work that whenever she tries to tell me, I'm like, please, I can't think about this right now. This is too stressful. So I have no idea where we're going. I know we're going to be in Tokyo at some point. I think we're going elsewhere from there. But all I know is that we're going to see Tokyo.
I mean, it's a long way from Tokyo, but are you tempted to try and squeeze Kagoshima into the
Oh
trip?
gosh. I don't want to mess up her plans at this point. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I mean, so again, if we look at Japanese Gothic and we look at the process, you had said before about beginning with a chapter by chapter outline. So I wonder how much detail was in this chapter by chapter outline because you also said the process was writing it as quick as possible.
Yeah, usually in my chapter outlines, I want to say just a paragraph or so. I'm not someone who writes like a novella for my outline and then goes back and expands on it. Though that probably would have been a better way to do that for this book, but usually just a couple sentences to know how it moves the story along, which turns out was not enough. Sometimes I try to like not write everything down because a lot of it I know is going to change when I actually start writing and feeling out the scene. But I guess there's a balance between, too much and not enough. Got to find where to land in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you said as well, each novel kind of requires a different amount. So
Yes,
it's almost like a lucky guess when you start planning.
pretty much. Just see what happens.
And with regards to inverting tropes, I mean, usually we have a who done it in terms of murders, but you've done with Lee a kind of how did I do it or how done it to say it grammatically incorrect, but it sounds better.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how did you go about approaching that?
I don't recall how that specific idea took root, though I will say at the time I was reading a lot of Katrina Ward's books, and she writes incredible psychological horror with unreliable narrators. And towards the end of all of her books, it's like she just yanks the rug out from under you, and you figure out what is actually true because you're not certain until the very end. And I think that's what I had in the back of my mind, what I was trying to emulate as I was writing this book. So I think I just thought, what would be the scariest hole to poke in this particular memory of his? And so I think that's how I ended up deciding. He didn't know how he killed his roommate, which is terrifying to think about if that were to be real. But yeah, I don't know exactly how that started.
Yeah, I mean, you're also playing with kind of the horror of mental illness, the horror of just unreliability of memory. And
Mhm.
even when, years pass between you doing something, hopefully for people listening, not as extreme as actually killing a person, but,
Yeah,
just even general, more mundane day to day things like whether it actually happened, how you remember it is something that, with time, unless there's video, which can also be manipulated.
exactly. Because, and I mean, I think you're alluding to this. Whenever you remember something, you're rewriting the whole story in your mind. And the more you remember it, the farther it becomes
Yes.
from what's actually true, which is terrifying. And actually, around the time I had also finished watching season 2 of Interview with the Vampire, which I think is phenomenal the way it does it, the way it talks about memory. Like, they even say in that show, memory is a monster. It's like this recurring saying. And in the beginning, you have the whole series through one character's perspective. And then towards the end of the second season, you start revisiting the scenes from season one. And now they're just slightly different now that the character is sort of confronting that he was a little bit biased in the way that he was trying to tell the story. And those like subtle differences in those scenes just change everything about the story. And that's so satisfying to me as a viewer, as a reader, when that happens. So that's something I really am trying to go for more in my own writing these days.
Oh, well, that's great to hear then, and I'll be looking forward to how that might happen in Hell to Pay as well.
Oh gosh, hopefully I can keep it going. I feel like there's only so many ways you can be like, I forgot. I was so traumatized. I didn't remember what happened. I feel like you can't do that in every single book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, or at least be a little more subtle with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you call a book Japanese Gothic, it comes with certain weighty expectations. Now, expectations that I would say you wonderfully met.
Oh, thank you.
But did you feel any self pressure just in giving the book such a hefty and definitive title?
So, to be honest, Japanese Gothic was my working title, just sort of a nickname I gave this project. And the only thought I put into calling it that was, well, I've read Mexican Gothic, and that's great. That's a spooky haunted house in Mexico that's kind of horror, but also literary. And that's what I want this to be. So I'll just call this Japanese Gothic. And then I actually titled it, when I sent it to my editor, The House of Sword Ferns, and then they didn't like that title, and so they went through all these lists of titles, and then I mentioned Japanese Gothic, and they were like, actually, that's good. Can we just use that? And I was like, you like that? That was just my working title. I didn't think about it at all. What do you mean you like it? And they were like, no, we like it. And I was like, okay, I trust you on this. So I definitely did not have huge lofty intentions when I picked that title. Put zero thought into it whatsoever. But as the story developed, I do think it fits pretty well, because when you talk about Gothic literature, I mean, I know traditionally we think about Western European or American, these crumbling mansions and whatnot. Though, what makes those types of stories scary, I feel like, is not the specifics of the architecture, that is culturally specific to Western Europe. I think it's just this ambiance of dread and fear, and this feeling of having lost this home that, I think the haunted house is such an incredible symbol of, just feeling so unmoored from your home. And I think that can be achieved in a house in any country, in any culture, with any kind of architecture. So I think the story sort of grew into the title in some ways.
I think as well, hopefully, you'll find that because it almost sounds like a genre category, you might get organic traffic through people
Ooh,
searching for, like, oh, I'd love to read a Japanese Gothic novel.
here's
Oh,
hoping. It
there's a novel
certainly
called Japanese
it
Gothic.
certainly is great for that search engine optimization, huh? If you're like Gothic novels, and then you find
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, talking about great titles, like I love the in your face nature of Hell to Pay. So I want to know, I don't know how much you can talk about, seeing as this is not coming out until next year, but what is the basic premise? Or if you can't give that, just what can you tell me about Hell to Pay?
Yeah, so I haven't worked out my elevator pitch for this one yet, though I will say it's about three roommates in New York City, whose apartment gets claimed by a demon, and they try to leave, but they can't afford to break their lease. So they have to just sort of stay there and deal with it. One of the roommates works at a publisher, and she has multiple reflections that whisper to her she should do terrible things. One of them is a line cook who has a shadow man friend who also encourages him to do terrible things. And one of them is a former surgeon who keeps finding disembodied hands and fingers everywhere and just has to deal with that. So it is a very weird book.
I can see quite obviously why it is called Hell to Pay. I like the numerous levels that works on, but oh my god, that sounds amazing. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait for it.
I gotta find a way to like pitch that better because it's so hard to convey like yes, this is a demon possessing your house story, but also it's really weird.
Yeah, but I think, really weird, that's the kind of flavoring that makes novels these days so special.
I
You
think
know,
so too, yeah.
we don't want something generic. We don't want something that just follows the archetypes and the tropes and the same kind of wearily trodden path. So I'm
For sure. There's so many, and I'm not talking about myself here. There's so many new and interesting writers in the horror genre that I think are doing such new and incredible things.
Well, who are some of your favorites that you've recently
Oh
discovered?
gosh, okay, so my favorite, I mean, this is not gonna, these are all like very big names. This is not gonna be an under the radar or anything, but Paul Tremblay's horror movie where he has a script, like a movie script inside it, so cool. And he really used that to make the story more interesting. It wasn't just like this fancy peacock flourish kind of trick, like, ooh, look how interesting multimedia it is. Look, he really used it. Um, Also, Grady Hendrix is one of my favorite authors of all time. But oh, I know someone who's not quite as mainstream. Alex Gonzalez writes such intense, weird, and very compelling horror. He wrote a book called Wrecked, which is about snuff films. And then he wrote recently a book called The Man of Wind and Moss, which is about a forest man who comes to attack a group of people camping in the woods. So it's like a very familiar premise, but it just has such emotional depth to it and is so legitimately scary. You then have authors like Stephen Graham Jones and Sylvia Moreno Garcia, who are just doing things that are new and risky, and it's paying off. And so that makes me excited for the future of horror.
Oh yeah, I mean there's an enormous amount of reasons to be excited and you have listed a few of them.
Yeah.
And in terms of Grady Hendrix, am I right in thinking that he blurbed Japanese Gothic?
Um, he either blurbed Japanese Gothic or Bat Eater. I don't recall which one. He's definitely blurbed one of them. I should know this. You want to know something funny? Is he's actually the uncle of one of my childhood friends, which I didn't find out until a few years ago. It's this guy who I've known literally since kindergarten. And he's always mentioned his famous author uncle, but then he didn't actually mention his name until one day when he casually mentioned the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire Slaying. And I was like, wait. Your uncle that you've talked about all this time is Grady Hendrix? And he was like, yeah, yeah, he is. And then all these lights went off in my brain because, like, I know his mother because we went to kindergarten together and his mother's last name is Hendrix. And I was like, oh my God, you know Grady Hendrix. And then he put me in a text group chat with him and Grady Hendrix. And he's very nice. He's an incredibly nice guy. So that was one of the most exciting moments of my life.
So is that the first time that you interacted with Grady Hendrix, just being put into a
Oh,
chat?
so we were actually me and Grady Hendrix and some other authors were on this virtual panel together purely by chance. I did not engineer this to make this happen. And then my friend, his nephew, was also just watching it. And then I just saw this notification that had John, my friend, and then an unknown number. And it was just, I'm watching now. You guys are doing great. And I texted him separately and I was like, John, is the other person in this group chat Grady Hendrix? And he said yes. So that was an exciting moment.
Wow. Just so surreal to have
Yeah.
that happen to you.
Yeah. I it's great. I love it.
Well, I'm wondering, what is it that frightens you?
Um, so I don't have normal people fears. I think I was just too exposed to horror as a child. So, things like, serial killers and ghosts and everything. I mean, obviously, I don't want to be in a situation with a serial killer. That doesn't sound desirable to me at all, but I'm not like losing sleep over it. The things, the one thing that gets me is spiders, which is hilarious because even if it's very small spiders, it's like I'll go sleep over in a murder house, but I still need someone else to squish a spider for me. So yeah, that's my kryptonite is tiny little insects that can do me no harm.
Yeah, so maybe that could be an issue visiting Okinawa to go back to
Oh
that.
yeah. Oh gosh, yeah, everywhere it gets hot and humid, the bugs are so big, I know. That's honestly a big reason why I've never been to Australia. Like that's
Right.
legitimately kind of a big deal breaker for me.
I mean, Australia, everything wants to kill you, including the weather. That's kind
You
of,
see, I feel like if I lived in Australia, being afraid of spiders would be justified because they could actually harm me. None of the
yeah.
spiders in Boston could ever harm me. I'm just a wimp.
Uh, well, what is something that you believe that many other people do not?
Hmm. In terms of like spooky stuff or
We're
just in
taking
general,
this as broadly as you want to.
something I believe that other people do not. Can you give me an example? I'm struggling to think of
I
something.
mean, so as you said, it could be spooky. It could be in terms of philosophies. It could be in terms of ways to live one's life.
Okay, I'm trying to think about what I can say that's gonna offend the smallest group of people. Not to say that I have like super edgy hot takes, but anything I say that like confidently, I want to be careful about how I say it. Okay, this is a very specific to the publishing industry kind of take. Um, but I see a lot of authors saying almost like a badge of honor, like, I write all day. I spend so much time writing. And I just don't think that's actually possible or good for you. I think it's actually incredibly unhealthy. And I say this as a full time writer. I think it's a terrible idea to do nothing but write all day. I think you need hobbies outside of yourself, or I think your brain is going to start to just devour itself and your writing will suffer.
Well, I mean, what is, on the topic of writing, what is the best writing advice that you've been given? And what is the worst writing advice that you've been given?
Interesting. Okay. Worst writing advice. I'll start with that because I can think of that one. When I was in college, we were in my creative writing classes. We were reading some of the, fiction 101 types of books. And one thing that they talked about was not writing characters who are too much like you because you don't want it to become a self insert character, which I understand on some level and I agree with on some level. But what I think that translated to for me was that it's amateur if I write like an Asian American female character with my identity because that's like that's too much of a self insert. And so actually the first book I wrote, which was not ever published, was about a Korean American boy because I wanted to write an Asian character, but I didn't want to write something that specific because I thought that was bad. And then, I got more involved in the writing community and was like, no, actually it's a good thing to write from your own experiences. Though I do think you should still be careful not to make it too much of a self-insert, but I think writing about, your heritage is only ever a good thing. And then the best writing advice I'd ever had. So I've read quite a few craft books and I'm trying to think of what. Okay, I know. So there's a book called Story Genius, which I go back to all the time. It's so helpful for me in beginning to write a book. And essentially, the core idea throughout the whole book is that your character's emotional journey, their internal arc, matters more than anything else. And you need to figure out what that is before you think about anything external to them. In fact, you need to build the world around your character's emotional arc to support them on their journey, and not the other way around. They shouldn't be going through a world and like seeing what happens. The world should be there to support them. And I think a lot of authors do this intuitively. And I think on some level I did, though once I read it and actually like solidified that idea in my mind, it's been so helpful for my writing to consciously make sure I'm doing that in all of the scenes, because I agree with it so much. And now I see it all the time, books and movies that don't do that. And I understand now why I didn't connect with them as much as I did other books. And so I think so many people would solve so many problems if they in their writing if they read that book.
So after you'd read the book, did it dramatically change how you were planning your novels?
Um Yeah, I mean, I think because I've tried out a few different planning methods over the years, so I have that whole template saved now, and that's definitely where I start. And if you were to look at the end product of my novels before and after, I don't think anything would look too dramatically different, but I do think honestly it's really helped me to focus in on what is important in a story and really streamline the writing process around that central idea, and catching a few things here and there where I'm like, oh, actually this scene is here for no reason, it doesn't advance the character's emotional journey. Whereas I mean, I'm sure I do in some of my first two or three books have scenes like that I'm sort of like, I don't know why this is here, I was just sort of vibing when I wrote it. But now I'm a little bit more conscious of that, I think.
Now, you said a question ago that it's not a good idea for writers to spend all their day writing, or at least it's not the
Uh-huh.
healthiest thing to do, let's say that. And you also said that there comes a point where you get diminishing returns from your writing.
Mhm.
So, on that basis, I mean, we've spoken about writing routine, but what does a typical day look like for you? Or if that's too difficult, then what does a typical week look like for you?
No, that's not too difficult. I'm a creature of habit. I'm very very structured. So usually, like, I'm at my desk writing at maybe 8 o'clock at the latest. I try to get there at like 7:30, and then I write until like 12, 11:30, 12 or so, doing my like most difficult creative work of the day, which is usually drafting. Or if I don't have anything to draft at the moment, maybe like developmental editing or something like that. And then at that point is when I either go for a run or go to my group strength class, because that's the only time I can bring myself to exercise after I've done the most important work of the day. I'm like, okay, I get to go outside now and see the sunshine. Then I come back and have a shower, and then I do emails and the work that I need slightly less of my brain on for. And then I'll do things I can turn my brain down another notch for, like reading or looking at, cover sketches and being like, looks great, thumbs up, please. Yeah, go with that. Um, and then I'll eat dinner and watch a horror movie or something else terrible. That's usually what I'm up to.
I mean, it sounds a pretty nice day, to be honest. It
Oh, no,
sounds
it's
like,
it's great.
yeah.
I'm very lucky to be able to do that, because God knows I would not have time to write and run if I were still working in the archives, from 9 to 5. I would just, perish upon, arriving home at the end of the day.
So when you were working in the archives, when were you getting the opportunity to write?
So I whenever I could. I mean, I was not working full time. In the archives, I was working 2 to 3 days a week, so I still had a few days where I could write, though there were also times when those other days were taken up by my other job. I was working at a public library while I was working in the archives, or I was doing an internship at a different archive. There was at one point where I was doing like two jobs, an internship and full time grad school. But I never really had, ever since I left Korea, a 9 to 5 schedule. It was always like an afternoon shift here and a morning shift here. So there would be some parts during the day where I could fit it in, where I had to fit it in if I wanted it to happen at all. That and weekends, because I sometimes had to work one weekend day at the library, but not often. So that was when it had to happen. Whereas now I try, if at all possible, to take my weekends off, which is lovely.
And of course, another element of the business of writing, which a lot of writers understandably aren't too keen on, is the marketing and the publicity and the
Yes.
just getting the word out about the book. So, I mean, what are your non negotiables? What are the things that you have to do to ensure that you're kind of signal boosting your own work? And then what are perhaps some of the best things that you've done?
Oh gosh, I mean, I don't know what I have to do. I mean, what I try to do is post major updates on Instagram. That's really the only social media platform I have anymore. So things like, cover reveals, if I get any special type of recognition, award, I try to intersperse it with pictures of myself in my normal life so people remember I'm a human, and not just someone who's really bad at making graphics on Canva. Um, I have a newsletter that I send out once a week. I mean, sorry, not once a week. Oh God, I would die. Once a month, which is sort of a roundup of updates and also, things going on in my personal life. And then the other main thing I do is just try to do interview and event requests that come through my publicist that they think are good opportunities that would be a good use of my time. I've kind of given up on doing things like TikTok. I had a whole stage where I was trying to make that work, but it's just not something I enjoy. And honestly, I've found, my horror novels have performed very well. I've seen a lot more success and reaching a lot more people with my adult horror compared to my young adult books, where with my young adult books, I was doing a lot more marketing on my own. I was making a lot more TikToks and thinking a lot more about social media. And just for me, I think that was never the path to success. It was never that. For some people it could be. It's what makes their books popular. Um, but for me it really wasn't. And so it's not something I am trying to put as much time into anymore. I'm just trying to do things like this that I think are fun because I love yapping about horror. Oh my gosh. So I just do things that I feel like add to my energy and that my publicist says I probably should try to make time for.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok in particular is possibly the most volatile platform that exists. And it is almost just throwing things into the mix and seeing what sticks. But the real
Yeah.
difficulty is for anything to stick, you have to throw a lot in. Whereas, Instagram, which you mentioned, I feel it's just more steady and it's more predictable and it's more reassuring. So,
Yeah, I think of Instagram more as for reaching mostly people who already follow me and want updates, whereas I think TikTok was better for finding new people when your TikToks do well, which mine did not often do.
yeah, I think as well the algorithm for TikTok is brutal. Like they'll assess within the first 5 or 10 seconds as to whether your video is going to be a success. And I don't know. I do think that the prevalence of video and it being needed to a point for authors is almost ironic or just a horrible cruelty because it's like if we wanted to be in front of a camera and to be making these quick viral videos, we wouldn't be spending the best part of a year or half a year on our own writing novels where you don't need to see our face, you don't need to hear us.
Exactly. I think John Green said in one of his interviews that people write novels so they can tell you a story without looking you in the eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I yearn for the days of Lemony Snicket when like no one would even know your real name or face.
Yeah. Yeah. Things are changing, but there's a hope that, I mean, things become cyclical and but perhaps we will go back to that. I mean,
Oh,
don't
here's hoping.
especially want to get into it too much, but particularly with like, this prevalence of deep fake and AI videos and because now there is almost an unreliability as to what is and isn't true. Maybe people will just trust text more because we can no longer trust video.
Oh gosh, but even you can't trust anything these days. I don't
Well,
know if you heard about that whole controversy with the AI book. Oh gosh.
oh, well, I mean, I heard of it. I
Uh-huh.
didn't read into it too. I mean, because the headlines seemed to kind of tell me all I
Yeah,
needed to
yeah.
know. I didn't need to deep dive. I mean, I don't know what to say. Don't use AI to write a book because that isn't writing a book.
Yeah, it's a scary times we're living in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Chuck Palahniuk, when he was talking about AI and writing, he was saying that he thinks what makes, writing to be beautiful and artistic is the imperfection. It's having those errors, it's having those flaws
Yeah.
and that kind of soul and that emotion and that imperfection, that is something that AI can't replicate.
Yeah, definitely.
I think as
At
long
least
as
not yet.
yeah, but I think as long as you're writing original, weird stories, then that you're gonna get by, and you
So I just got to keep
certainly
getting weirder and
yeah,
weirder.
that's it, that's it.
I can do that.
It sounds like you're doing that as the highest
I'm
compliment, and
trying.
yeah. Well, apart from just keep getting weirder, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if there's anything. I feel like she would figure it out, you know. I think everything all the this is very cliche of me to say. But all the mistakes you make along the way, they all make you who you are. And so I feel like 18-year-old Kylie was fine, and the things I could tell her wouldn't make a difference. Like, I'd be like, stop being so dramatic about boys, none of it matters. But like, you couldn't tell that to an 18-year-old. Like, I wouldn't go, oh yeah, okay, you're right. Like, I would just be like, I don't believe you, screw you, like, I'm gonna do what I want. So I think everything, she's got it. I trust 18-year-old Kylie.
Well, I'm sure she'd appreciate your faith in her. And yeah, I suppose that is the flaw in the question that you can tell an 18-year-old anything, but they're rarely
Yeah.
going to actually listen.
Yeah.
But something people should listen to is why should they pre order Japanese Gothic?
Oh gosh, if you like to be sucker punched by plot twists by unreliable narrators, if you want to find out which of the timelines between 1877 Samurai Girl and 2026 guy who killed his college roommate but doesn't remember how, which one is a ghost, which one isn't real, there's only one way to find out, and it's to read Japanese Gothic.
There you go.
That was that. That's my
Everybody in instant pre order right there.
perfect.
Well, where can our listeners and viewers connect with you?
Kylie Lee Baker on Instagram. My website's KylieLeeBaker.com. Everywhere I am is Kylie Lee Baker, so I'm really easy to find.
All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts?
No, just thank you so much for chatting with me. I love talking about horror. You've been a wonderful host.